Hello and welcome to another recorded coaching session. I'm your host, Suzanne Kohlberg, joined today by Jacinta. For anyone watching this, if this is your first one of these sessions, you'll find in the video description a link so you can apply and have your session. And basically the rule of thumb is the session is for free in exchange for it being recorded and uploaded on YouTube. If you're a little bit hesitant about having your face on YouTube, happy just to use your first name, happy to alter what we talk about, so use pseudonyms or whatever, because I understand it's a big confronting thing to talk about boundaries and talk about boundaries on the internet. And if someone happens across it who knows you, chances are people always make stuff about them. I was saying that to Jacinta before we hit record. The number of times I've shared client stories that has just been an example and someone's messaged me, it's like, I know that was about me. In all the times, only one person ever has been right. And yeah, it's here's the way it is. But, you know, this is what we're running with today. So, Jacinta, first of all, welcome.
Thank you.
My question is, if we were to walk away at the end of this hour, or hour, close to an hour, and you were like, this was amazing, what would you like to walk away with?
I think better clarity about organizing and focusing. That would be the two things that I want to work on. How to organize
Tell me more
myself.
about that. In which context?
I'm restarting my career in Australia after years overseas. And
that must be daunting. I'm just going to pause you right there. Where were you overseas?
I was in the Pacific.
Oh,
and established a very good career over there, a good reputation. And so I've just moved back. I've moved back to Australia, and I've been working in teaching for many years, and I've just been considering where I'm going to go from here. And with all the move, it's sort of stirred up a whole lot of I'm feeling quite unsettled at the moment. And so I'm trying to work out like where exactly I want to go and how to focus and get better organized.
Perfect. That makes sense. And when you said you've moved back to Australia, are you in the same place, like suburb area that you lived in before, or?
Absolutely not. I grew up down south in Victoria, and it's way too cold now. I've become quite tropical.
I was going to say, if you've been in the islands, then yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's funny because I live close to the Big Pineapple. I'm on the Sunshine Coast.
I love the Sunshine Coast. So there's lots of factors here. Like you've been living overseas, so then there's the culture shock, even though it's coming back to the culture that you're from, but also in an entirely different state, entirely different, you know, way of going about things. And, you know, having some career, I'm trying to think of the word, like uncertainty, unsettledness, which makes total sense because you've done a massive uprooting. Awesome. Okay.
And I've also gone from a stable job for over 20 years in the same sort of environment and with where I built up a good reputation and things were very settled. And now I'm starting afresh and trying to prove myself to different areas. And it's daunting, but it's also exciting. I feel like I'm at the crossroads at the moment, and I'm trusting that everything that's happening is what's meant to happen and that I'm being pushed in a particular way. And one thing that's happening is it seems I might be ADHD. So I'm in the process of getting a possible diagnosis, or actually maybe I'm part, you know, a little bit ADHD, but very open. I have a lot of energy and a lot of I'm trying to think of the word in English, dynamism, and just wondering where I can focus that. And somebody actually suggested last week maybe I could become an ADHD coach for kids. And kids just light me up. They're got so much beautiful energy, and they're such a bundle of energy, and I love that. I love the potential that they have that they don't necessarily see.
I love that. And just out of curiosity, and there's not a right or wrong answer, I'm just curious, why an ADHD coach for kids and not adults?
That's a very good question. I don't know. I
The
don't
reason
know.
I ask, and never to put, like, never to inject, but just things to consider when you're new in a coaching business, or in any sort of business, particularly
Yep.
coaching business, if you're ever going to coach kids, I'm not sure of any legalities, like looking at legal stuff as opposed to adults who are of consenting age. And
Yes.
second of all, whenever you're doing a coaching business, if you're coaching somebody who is not the bill payer, like a child's not going to be paying for the coaching themselves,
Yeah.
then it's something to look at marketing to the parents,
Yeah.
because the parents are going to be the
Yeah.
ones who hire you versus
Yeah.
the coaching of the children. And there's a whole relationship dynamic, which is, very different, or something to consider, as opposed to if you're a coach for adults and they come across your videos or your content and then they interact with you. So
Yeah.
it's like appealing's not the right word, but connecting with the person who's going to be paying for it versus the person who's going to be doing it.
Yes.
And it's just extra layer. It's something to consider. It's not something I have coached myself. I've always coached people of consenting age, and all my contracts say that. But something, to look at, and I'd be definitely, and you're in Australia now, so I can recommend a good Australian lawyer, or there's people you could look up just to ask about the legalities of that for people who aren't of consenting age, something to consider.
Yeah. Oh no, there's a lot of different ideas about what I can do. I've really thought too about the use of movement. I love walking. I love nature. I love swimming in waves, and movement makes me happy. And when you look at ADHD kids, they're often happiest running around a field. And I know that there's one thing. I have a memory of a child of being sent to see a counsellor at a particular stage in my life, and feeling like a trapped animal on a couch with this person I didn't know, and being stuck there, knowing I was stuck there for a whole hour, and thinking it was just torture. And so the idea of actually doing a session with people while outside and moving, or even at least on an exercise bike, so you're not looking at the person. So I've got lots of ideas about things to do, and I'm unsettled. I feel like the bomb's gone off. My life's sort of been moved, and I'm just trying to work out which pieces I bring back together,
100%.
and how to focus and move forward from here. And also, as you say, moving back into a country that I'm very at home with. I've spent every January in Australia for the last 20 so and so years visiting people. So but I think it's different visiting to actually living. So I'm not sure what the constraints are and how to set this kind of thing up. So yeah, I'm open to ideas and suggestions and guiding, and also I've been very, very scattered also with my attention. Like, I'm finding it really hard to focus on one thing. So I'm using the school holidays at the moment to power through some books, which has been good. But yeah, where do you start?
Where do we begin? Well, my first
clean up?
question,
Yep.
you mentioned potentially diagnosis of ADHD for yourself.
Yeah.
Are you going through the official channels for that? Because I know it can
Yes.
take years. I had my son diagnosed on the spectrum recently.
Yep.
And the other thing that you said was you had the stable job for 20 years, and now it's, starting fresh, or as
Yep.
in restarting in a new location.
Yep.
Are you currently employed? So do you have a job?
I've been doing relief teaching.
Okay. Yeah.
And I've been doing primary and secondary level. And when I had my set job in the set place, and I had a strong reputation, I was working with sort of year 6 to year 9 kids, and everybody knew me. I had my reputation. I had a great connection with the kids. And I've been finding with relief teaching, walking into a classroom, you don't know the kids don't know you. I've been finding that the hardest thing I think I've ever done, to not have a connection and to have very little time to set up a connection. And so I'm really not enjoying that, and the uncertainty. I think I do like a bit of stability, and I'm excited about the potential of where I can go and what I can do, but I don't like walking into a classroom for 1 hour.
Yeah, well, it's good that you know that, because like relief teaching is a totally different thing. I did it for a very brief period. My sister did it for much longer. And a lot of it is, you know, your personality and things. I never liked it because I didn't imagine similar to you, to establish the rapport, to establish
Yeah.
relationship. You don't have agency over the curriculum. You're usually just
Yeah.
given a lesson plan, which you may or may not agree with or think's relevant, or know how the children are going to respond to it, because you don't know, you haven't got that relationship to know who's where. So if you're like, okay, this is, you know, ticking things over while I'm exploring what it is that I want to do going forward.
Yeah.
My next question is, because you said you had the stable job for 20 years, starting fresh, obviously starting fresh if you've moved to a new country or back to a country, would you want a permanent teaching position again? Or do you feel like, actually, I'm feeling that part of my career is wanting to shift?
I really don't know.
Mm.
I have moved away from secondary for the moment, because when you do primary relief teaching, it's a bit more stable. You get the one class for the whole day and you have some time to build up connections with them. And I've had some really, really fun moments with kids. One particular class I had recently, I said, I want you all to teach me something by the end of the day. And they all got excited. So I learned, you know, a new word in Samoan, I learned a new word in Arabic, and I learned sign language, and I learned about, you know, Vikings, and it was really, really cool. And they were so excited that teaching is both ways. So it's definitely pushed me out of my comfort zone, and it's I've developed very quickly new skills to deal with it. But the stress of not knowing what's happening in a day, whereas in the past I had control over that, is pretty intense.
Yeah.
And I don't think long term that I can do that. I think I prefer a bit more stability.
Yeah.
At
The
the
reason
moment,
I ask
yeah.
is, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but as much as I love coaching, I'm a coach myself. I wouldn't say it's the career to go into for stability,
Yeah.
because growing an audience in whichever way you choose to, newsletter, podcast, YouTube,
Yeah.
networking, or whatever, like growing an audience or a following, creating the offer. So sometimes you have something and it's selling like hotcakes and you're like, I've done it. And then the same offer gets crickets. Like, it can be a lot of feast and famine. And some people, if you're watching this, you may have different experiences to me. That's okay. We all have. I've been in the industry since 2017, and I found a lot of the stuff that looks pretty on the outside on the internet. It's kind of like an Easter egg. It's bright and shiny on the outside, and then once you're in there, it's kind of, you know, the shitty and stuff in the middle. But, you know, it can be done. But, you know, how much effort, especially in a time of great upheaval already, moving countries, moving friendship circles, and all that sort of stuff, to then start a career that is, you know, if you're craving that stability. But then again, you could also argue that even a traditionally employed person is never stable. Like, the school you're at could close, or the district could downsize, or there's all sorts of things. Like, whenever, you know, as humans, we often crave certainty, but where they say the only things certain in life are death and taxes. But, you know, all jokes aside, but it's looking at, okay, so what, because the thing is, if I had your teaching experience and I didn't want to go back to a traditional classroom, like, you know, is there alternative things you could explore within teaching, like becoming a tutor or something?
I've realized that I need contact with kids. Like, when I walk into a classroom and I look at the kids, I light up like a Christmas tree. And I love watching them light up one by one as I, you know, find things to say to them. So I feel like there's something that I want to keep. And I know when we had lockdowns over the time, when I walked back into the classroom after a few weeks off, like, it was just magical. Like, so the power of kids and the beauty of kids, it's just something that I really, really enjoy.
That's
And
good to know. Because the other thing
yeah,
too, when you think about it, if you did become an ADHD coach for kids, which is totally a possibility,
yeah,
it'd be looking at, okay, so what hours would I be working? Because if I'm working with kids, the chances are I'm going to work in the evenings or early, like after school time, because kids are tired in the evenings, all
yeah,
the weekends, all the holidays. Is that when I want to work?
yeah,
Because, like, I was thinking of the time I was a personal trainer. I feel like I've done a bit of everything, but personal trainers work when people don't work. So I'd work
yeah,
from like 5 a.m. till 9 a.m. Then I'd have the day off, and then I'd work from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. So split shifts. So if you're working with children, unless you worked with younger children who weren't yet at school, but then you would need to navigate around nap times and illness and have really strong cancellation policies and boundaries because, you know, people are often well-meaning, but if the kids are sick and they don't want to pay, it's like if you're a hairdresser and people go, oh, I can't come today, then the hairdresser doesn't get paid unless there's somewhere that has walk-ins, and you're unlikely to have walk-ins in an ADHD coaching for business kind of arrangement.
And the thing is too, when you have kids who are still at school and you want to have quality time with them, so therefore possibly ADHD coach for adults would perhaps be more flexible.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is more and more people are becoming aware of ADHD, especially for women, especially because there's the 3 types. I can't remember them off the top of my head. There's the traditional one, which we all recognize, the hyperactive. And there's the one, I had 3 episodes on my podcast of a lady who's an ADHD coach. And there's the one type, which I can't remember it, but it's the hyperactivities in the brain. So from the outside, they look like the good girl in the classroom who's good and quiet and nods, but inside the brain is going. I think that's many of us are being diagnosed with that, whether it be self-diagnosis or through all the steps, because that can take years. But people who are exploring, perhaps my brain is wired differently than, you know, I'm not scattered or unsettled or overwhelmed. It's just the world isn't designed with the way that I do things in mind. So how I can communicate that to others without feeling like I'm demanding or anything like that. So that could be a total avenue, you know, that you could explore.
Yeah, they're definitely words I'd use to describe myself at the moment: scattered, unsettled, and overwhelmed. It's, but at the same time, it's quite exciting. And I had a friend who was talking about a recent ADHD diagnosis, and somebody described her as a sparkly, funky unicorn. And I just thought, oh, that sounds fun. Yeah. So it's recognizing what's inside as well, and working with it. So and little girls weren't meant to be sparkly, funky unicorns. When we were kids, we were supposed to sit still and be nice and be polite.
So funny to say that. I just last week went to my kids' school assembly, which part of me was happy too, like obviously to see my kids, but part of me was like, the second I walked in there, the way they walked in regimented lines, the way they were like, shh, the way they had to sit still and keep their hands in their laps. And I was just like, oh, I feel like I'm suddenly transported to like 30 years ago. It hasn't changed at all.
Yeah. That's a very hard thing to do, to be a relief teacher in charge of a grade 2 class, for example, who's sitting at assembly, and you're looking at your watch going, ring bell, ring, like that.
Yeah, 100%. And so if you decided, okay, I'm going to pursue this ADHD coaching for adults, you could even narrow down to women if you wanted to, or who've been diagnosed later in life, or who have self-diagnosed, like they're really, and there's a summit coming up. I'll email you after this. If I forget, feel free to email me, because now I know that my neurospicy brain, I promise things, I forget, and people sitting around, I'm like, just ask me. But it's a summit for neurodivergent business owners. I attended it last year. It was fabulous. It's at the end of this month, so it's coming up at the time that you and I are recording this. But all different people about how they organize their business to be in service to them, rather than you trying to be, you're putting yourself in a way that doesn't work for you. So would you like to work with people? And once again, we're only painting a picture here. We don't have to get into the weeds. One-on-one or in a group?
Probably a bit of both.
And how would you like to attract, magnetize? How would you like people to come across you? Like, how do you want to market? Just thinking about this is just ideas, not locking yourself into anything.
I don't know, because I'm not that good at self-promotion. I've always been quite quietly sort of confident in my abilities, but very that's confident in my abilities, knowing that I can do a good job, but not very good at self promotion. And I hate the spotlight on me. So it's that would be very hard to do. Yeah.
How do you like to buy? Do you like to buy from people who are kind of salesy and self-promoting?
No.
So what attracts you to someone as a buyer?
Someone that I trust. Someone that I feel
So
a
if you think of
connection.
a way that you can connect and build trust with your audience rather than a way to sell to them, does that give you any like ideas or insights or things that come to you?
Well, I think what you do, which is the videos, the videos, you have a beautiful energy, and so you're just someone that I've trusted for a long time. So I love your honesty and your I read your book a while ago and just loved it.
Thank
Yeah.
you. So
Yeah.
I think when we, oh, sorry, I was going to say,
No.
when
Yeah, the
we're
book.
looking at this self-promoting,
Mm.
oh, I feel skeezy. Like,
Yeah.
but if it's like, I'm just sharing myself, my story, because like at the moment,
Yeah.
you don't yet have the diagnosis, you're still going through the process. Is that correct?
Yes.
So if you started to document that in whatever way felt good for you, whether you started a newsletter and just had a simple sign-up box, Jacinta's Journey to ADHD or whatever, the name can
Yeah.
always change later,
Mm.
or a Facebook page or an Instagram, like just, so for anything in business, you need, it's kind of simple, a way for people to find you, a way for people to pay you, and like an offer of what they're paying you for.
Mm.
Like so many times people go on about things about click-worthy headlines and drill-worthy offers and make the, you know, and it's like, what is the person actually buying?
Mm.
So if you're kind of like, okay, because at the end of the day, it depends what they're hiring you for. But, you know, I imagine integrity, honesty, transparency will be all part of your message because I've known you for quite some time. So if you
Mm.
said, I'm on this journey myself, I'm wanting to help others, this is what I've done so far, and spoke about that and shared it in
Mm.
whichever way felt good for you,
Mm.
you don't need to have a here's my 6-month package at X dollars and in session one we're going to do this, because you don't know what you're going to do with them yet. But also you don't want to have, well, just give me money and like I'll get, you know, it's just kind of like having a description of whether you had, so I'd think for you to start with, if you have some sort of intro session. So I'm just trying to think, I have a client and she's just coming to mind for whatever reason. She is really interested in astrology and numerology. So I'm like, it's kind of cool when you do something like that, because people who are interested in it, then they're interested in it. They know what it is. Whereas say some people who do like human design or something, it's not as well known. If you don't know what it is, you're not going to go and go, I want this. So the intro offer she's putting together is like a natal chart reading. I don't know a lot about it, but basically the natal chart is where the stars are at the time that you're born. So her intro offer is she does this session with somebody and does a reading of their chart. So if you're like, okay, I am going to, and this is just a suggestion, like, you know, you don't have, it's not a prescription, but if you're like, I want to work with women who are on the journey for ADHD, actually, question, do they know, like, are they knowing that they're ADHD and they're really looking into it? Or are they more feeling overwhelmed, confused, unsettled? Like, do they know what it is yet?
Mm.
Your people that you want to work with.
Don't know.
But it's something to consider too, because the way that you speak, like as in attract, bring in people, if you speak to somebody who knows that they're ADHD or suspect that they're ADHD, they already have a term for it. Whereas if it's a person who's just like, I've just reached this point in my life where, because like I imagine a lot of people who are diagnosed with ADHD later in life, from what I've read, from when I've interviewed others, what happens is often we go to school where it's very structured and we're told what to do, when to eat, when to not eat, how to do our homework, structured. Then we leave school and go to university or tertiary study, like TAFE, like further study, which is also structured. Then you go and get a job, which is very structured. And then for whatever reason, you have a life change. You get divorced, you move overseas, your kids leave home, like some big life change happens. And the structure that you were so not really knowing, reliant on, is not there anymore. And that's when, like, this ADHD symptoms and things were here all along, but they were masked. Like they talk about masking in ADHD by this external thing that is now no longer there. So you could think about, and this is just, you're going to be able to test it and find out and see, Are you talking to people who are suddenly empty nesters or have suddenly had a big life transition and now feel lost? And then you coach them on, like, it's not that they need a planner or a blueprint or a system. It's like, this has been something all along that you hasn't been clear till now. It's like, do you wear glasses or contacts?
Just starting to a little bit.
When I was younger, my parents, I don't know why, but they never had my eyes tested. And when I was 15, I was having lots of headaches and lots of issues at school, and eventually got my eyes tested. I wear contacts now, but I have really quite poor vision. And I remember coming out from the optometrist with my glasses on for the first time and being like, oh, the trees have leaves on them. Because I couldn't see them before. It's just a big green blessing, you know. So if you're working with the people to say, you know, this has always been the way, and now the world is becoming so much more friendly. Like, you can get gluten-free and vegan options almost everywhere, or you just go to another restaurant. And a lot of places have ADHD or autism spectrum allowances, quiet rooms, silent places.
Yes, it's true.
And if not, then don't go to that place.
Yeah.
Find somewhere else.
That's very true. Like, to go to and it just people accepting that you can wear headphones on. Because when I'm in a noisy room and I'm trying to focus, it just, like, so the idea that it's actually accepted now to put headphones on is pretty powerful shift in the world, that you don't have to put up with other people's noise.
100%. Or even, like, my sister runs a craft shop, and I said to her, like, I help out sometimes. It's in a different state to where I live, but part of the thing I have anxiety. So if I'm going somewhere new, parking my car, it sounds so dumb. And I've talked about it a few times. A few people are like, oh my gosh, me too. But if you say, like, I can't know if I can go there yet because I've got to suss out the parking situation. So when I went there, I did a Facebook Live for her. I showed the ample car parks, the overflow parks that we can open up and needed, and the quiet room if the noise of everyone doing their work is too much for you and you want to go, you know, and people come in and it's like, thank you. Because for some of us, the overstimulation is too much, and you only need 5 minutes. Just take a breath, listen to something, and then you can come back. But for people who get it, they get it. For people who don't get it, it's like, why'd you come out here if you just want to go and sit by yourself? And it's like, you know, you don't know. But if you began to coach people about this, how to advocate for their needs to be met, so they don't feel demanding or pushy or setting ultimatums, but just so that their needs can be met, so they can feel comfortable and pursue the things that they want to do.
Yeah.
The way that you're going to come up with a package for that is to do it, like, as in, have some people, take them through the process, see what comes up, what are the common themes, and from there you can totally create a program or something. But sometimes people want to create a program at the beginning, but you don't know what you're creating your program on because you haven't coached people yet.
Yeah. It's very true though, the checking out a place. I know when I did some exams as a mature age student, and you're actually allowed to go and observe someone else doing the exam, and that just helped calm me down so much. I could see, you know, where the jury was going to sit and how it was going to work and which rooms, and it just, so I think gently helping people discover new things together and supporting them is really, really powerful. And I think that's perhaps why I'm so unsettled at the moment too, because there's been so many changes and so many new things, and everything was all settled where I came from, and now it's yeah. Oh, that makes a lot more sense now.
Well, the other thing to consider, and you're in this time right now where you can, what I'd say, fuck around and find out, is, given you're so passionate about kids and learning, you might be able to do, instead of coaching, consulting. And if this is too overwhelming, that's why this is recorded. You can watch it back again later. Like, there's a lot to take in. But you could think about whether you come up with some sort of consulting practice for, whether it be schools, primary schools, high schools, or TAFE or further education, how to make the learning environment, I don't like the term friendly, accessible, whatever word you want to use, for people who are neurodivergent. So like this, the children's, my kids' school is fabulous. They have a quiet corner. The children can ask to go there. They have all sorts of things in place. My son, he knows the answers to things, but he really struggles to read. So they'll ask him the questions. Because in days of old, if you gave a written test, like I still remember when he was 5 and the question's like, how old are you? And he didn't know how to write a 5. So he drew 5 circles. Technically, the answer's wrong because he didn't write the numeral 5. So it's like, how can we truly test these children? Like, he knows the answer. He's just presenting it in a different way. So that, you know, it reminds me of that. You've probably seen that meme where it's like there's a fish and a gorilla and a cheetah, and it's like, now run.
Yeah.
So maybe your passion may lie in accessibility, or even a step further, because there's probably lots of people working in that. But what about accessibility for teachers and for substitute teachers? Because how many people are like, well, I just can't do that. Like, it's too stressful, as you were saying. How could you make this a little bit more accessible? So, because imagine when you get to a new school, each school has different rules, different times where their lunch is, different places the teachers are allowed to go, different things the kids can ask for. Like, even within my kids' same school, their birthdays are not quite 2 weeks apart. One of them was allowed to bring in something external as long as I wrote on it what each of the ingredients were and provided tongs for the kid to hand them out. My other child was like, no, we can't have outside food within the same school. I was like, that's really confusing.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand. I quite like the idea of that, in that I get stressed about the idea of having to go looking for clients, whereas if it's one by one sort of at home or something like that, but the idea of going into a school and doing that sort of thing, I think I'd be more comfortable with that. So then I'd have to work out what kind of training would I need to do
and how you would pitch that. Do you, because you're only newly back into the country, but if you had friends or contacts in the education department who could, you know, sometimes might be a few emails that you send, a few conversations that you have, because often places will have budgeting for this kind of thing. Like, the other thing that comes to mind is if you came up with some sort of presentation, I know you might be like, ooh, but that you could give, and then contact places like libraries, chambers of commerce, Rotary clubs. Like, what do each of these things want? They want presenters. They have space. So if you had in mind the spiel that you were going to give, like how to ADHD friendly your workplace, your meeting, your school, whatever it is, then you could get the funding from, you know, a lot of those places have funding to spend, but they don't know what to spend it on. Even communicating within a workplace, because people who, and they have the funding for that, because a lot of places are doing it now for, I'm trying to think, diversity and inclusion. This is a form of that, not based on race or language, but based on brain structure.
Neurodiversity,
so there is funding for that. So sometimes you just need an in or two. And then once you have the funding, you'd be like, okay, I'm going to this place this week, but then you communicate ahead of time, I need these things, or let me know what you have so you can work it together. But you could talk about your story. What an awesome example that would be.
I was part of an opening up in the particular system I was in. We had a vice principal who was actually dyslexic herself, and she was utterly brilliant. And she put us in it. She gave us a training session. She put us in the situation of being dyslexic. It was very, very uncomfortable. And then so we understood how difficult it was. And then she gave us tips on how to do it. So to create something that would be similar but ADHD focus could be really inspiring, because she unlocked the absolute desire to make things easier for these kids once you're put in their situation. And then the whole school changed. Like, all the teachers under her guidance changed the way, like, made much more of an effort to take things into account for dyslexic kids. And suddenly the results just went up, because we were taking them into, so you were talking about your son knowing the answer but not being able to communicate it properly. Well, very similar things. The kids were clever kids but just couldn't access the information properly, or articulate how to give the answers. So to do something similar where the ADHD kids could really flourish would be fantastic. And also, I know just recently when I've realised it's possible I do have ADHD, walking into a primary school and you give an activity and there'll be a few kids who'll say, oh, I can't do that, I'm ADHD. And I'll just turn to them and say, so am I, dude. And I don't have an official diagnosis. And I just say, look, all that means is I've got heaps of energy in my legs. I'm very clever. My family told me you're clever. You need to learn. So you choose to focus.
Yeah.
You could look out the window, but you make more efforts to focus rather than just giving up in advance. And the kids, you could see the light go on in their heads. They've almost been given this free card. I don't have to focus because I've got ADHD. So to say, you might have it, but make sure you do extra laps at lunchtime and then you come back in and you're focused in here.
Yeah, how to make it your superpower rather than your ball and chain.
Yeah.
And the last idea, because we're almost at time and I don't want to overwhelm you, once I see it's recorded so you can watch it back, is another avenue idea, if you try these ones, and these are so many things, you try them, see which ones you like, which one's fulfilling, which ones you can monetize. Something for parents of children with ADHD, and maybe you run this online or on Zoom or whatever, because often we don't know how we can advocate for our kids because we're not told that. So unless a workshop is run or something. So when Casimir goes to sit the NAPLAN, which for anyone listening outside Australia, it's, I can't remember the abbreviation, but it's basically a national test that every child in Australia sits in grades 3, 5, 7, and 9. And the idea is to see how the school is tracking against the national curriculum, but often the children will take it as a personal failing. That's a whole story for another day. But I didn't realize I could ask for him to have either longer time to do it or somebody to sit with him, because he has an official diagnosis, how to get the most out of this, what opportunities are available. Because if you don't know, you don't know. It can almost be this clandestine secret knock kind of thing. And someone said to me, why don't you just ask for him? And then once I did ask, because I didn't know I could ask, then there was a whole host of things. And then the other thing too, like my daughter Xanthi, she's on the gifted and talented scale. I didn't even know that there were selective schools. Once again, if you're outside Australia, you go to a school, if it's public, private's a whole story, but you go based on where you live and you're zoned, this is the school that you attend. One of the teachers said to me one day, an offhand comment at the school gate, so have you applied for Xanthi's to go to a selective school? And I just said, what's that? And so they academically, they have a few around the area that no matter where they live, the kids can go to help them extend themselves. I didn't know that was a thing. So, a lot is on the parents to be on the pulse. And then also too, she goes to high school next year. So this wasn't even on my radar. And people are like, oh no, you've got to apply in year 5. I was like, what? So I've missed out? Do you know what I mean? But if nobody's saying when, especially if you're ADHD yourself, I'm not officially diagnosed, but I'm almost certain I'm neurospicy. My kids are, so I wouldn't, but I don't always read everything. Even if the school sent it, I skim over it. So they may have told me, but I missed it. And then oh, so did you apply? Apply for what?
Oh, and the breaking down of the tasks of, well, how do I go through that? And I know as a teacher, we were extra careful around kids whose parents had come in and said, can you please make an extra effort? And not in a threatening way, but just saying, I know that this is available and I would like my child to have access to this, please.
Yes. Well, it's a big ask. It can be scary. And sometimes too, you don't know. A couple of times I've asked for things and then my kids have come back and told me the teacher said in front of the class, oh, Casimir, your mum emailed about this or whatever. And I'm like, oh my gosh, because he's humiliated. He's like, don't email again. I'll just, and I'm like, so then next time I don't email, I ring. Oh, actually I do email because I want the paper trail, but I say, and can this not please be announced in front of everybody? Because
no, there are, I wish I'd helped more as a teacher, the kids in the past, and it took this really active person who came across my path. But then just watching the kids absolutely flourishing was so rewarding, and you just like, oh wow. And I remember attending an information evening for the parents, and it was just tissues all round, because they were actually saying, this is what we're going to do for your kids, this is how we're going to do tests, this is what we have a thing about to help them focus better, blah blah blah. And the parents had tried to fight in the past and met so much resistance, and they were walking and saying, we're going to help your kids. And it was just so beautiful to watch and to be part of. And But also to be guided as a teacher. So I think parents need guidance.
Yeah, teachers need
Kids need
guidance, the school needs
guidance.
guidance.
Absolutely.
And if you like, this feels like your passion. So perhaps this going from a stable job for 20 years to starting afresh is the biggest gift to you because you have that industry experience. So you can come at it from the teacher's point of view and then bringing it in, because the other thing too, if the parents are doing the best they can and the teachers are doing the best they can and the school's doing the best they can, but they're all going about it separately. So like my son is on the spectrum, and when he was learning to write, as I said, he struggled a lot with it. We had different pencil grip positioners for him to get the hold. I didn't know anything about this. Anyway, the OT was teaching him to hold it one way. The teacher was showing him to hold it another way. The speech therapist was having him hold it another way. And then I realized he was just becoming a people pleaser because he was like, oh, I'm with Jared, I got to do this. Oh, I'm with Miss this, I got to do this. So sometimes, maybe your role could be the facilitator that brings these people together, because at the end of the day, we want what's best for little Johnny, not what's best so we get a tick in the box and we think, oh, we're doing great. Kind of makes me think of, have you got kids? Your own children?
Yes, I have two. Yeah.
When you're in the hospital and the midwife A comes in and goes, hold your baby like this, you hold your baby like that. And then midwife B comes in and goes, what are you doing? Hold them like this. So then all you're like, oh, who's on shift? And you're pushing your kid around rather than what's the best for you as a mother to bond and connect with your child.
Yeah, no, that's so true. There's a lot of, you've got me very excited now about all the different possibilities, but my goal is to help kids as much as possible and to help them blossom. And I could do a big mix between consulting for schools and so yeah, I need to start taking notes as to what's going on. And but how would you, being someone who doesn't look like the spotlight and then moving into videos would be quite
if I
challenging
were
for me.
you, how I would start this is anybody you know in the industry established within Australia, because that's where you are now, whether it be a principal, like somebody, I don't want to say with power, but you know what I mean, somebody who has a bit of clout.
Experience,
Anybody in the education department, because the other thing you might find is there may be universities that are doing studies on this kind of thing. Like imagine if you could get aligned with a study who's doing a long-term follow-up of children with ADHD or something, and you could, because those studies would have a funding. So this would be a paid thing for you to be part of. And then, then you're getting onto an established cause, bandwagon, whatever you want to call it, rather than going it alone. Because you could totally create any of these things alone, but in the beginning, in industries of education in Australia, other countries are different, where education is free in inverted commas. Sometimes asking things to people for pay for things, like the parents or whatever, could be a stretch financially because the cost of living right now, or could be, well, why should I have to pay for this? Education's free. Like the same sometimes with health things. People are like, well, I don't want to pay for that. Doctors are free, and then they're not popular, and all this sort of thing. So if you could find a local government, a university, a something that is funding this, that you could be part of and bring your ideas to, you could be A, paid from the get-go, B, not have to create, which is going to add to the overwhelm thing, and not focus on making videos. But in terms of what you can do from today, if you decide that you wanted to document what you're doing in some way, shape, or form, you could start a Facebook page or an Instagram and just update it. The thing that you would need to be mindful of is, as you go into these other things, they might have a non-compete, or they might have something in place, an NDA. So what you share in your journey versus what you share when you're being employed. Like if you're government employee, they're like, you can't do X. So just making sure that you're upfront and open everywhere, so that you don't find out you're fired later for a non-compete that you've broken inadvertently.
That's a really good point, because there's a lot that I don't know. That exciting. Thank you. I feel better. I feel a lot more I feel like I've got a much better idea of where I can go from here. And I think I really don't like the spot on me. So I think if I then focused on training up parents, and that's what I've observed too in my experience with this dyslexic support, watching watching the support for the parents and the support for the kids and the support for the teachers all coming together beautifully in one school. That could be really, and then doing a similar thing for ADHD. Although I've been told possibly to keep an eye out as well for the spectrum as well, because they often come together.
And the spectrum, I know, has a lot of funding and a lot of things in place. Just once again, knowing who to ask and have you in. But like my son's on the spectrum, and there is so many things. But also, once again, knowing what you what's accessible for you, what's covered and what's not covered, how much it is. Like the other thing you might want to consider, if you know anyone, or put your feelers out for an introduction for somebody who is in the NDIS, because I know the spectrum is covered under NDIS. I don't know about ADHD. I don't know enough about it. But then there's funding.
It is, but it's often the kids who get funding have often got the two together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So because then if you can get a funded position in what that you do, and you created a workshop that you could give at the schools, maybe the school could claim it through their funding, or the parents, like sometimes the school puts out feelers to us. These are the things we're having. Like, so this coming school holidays, there is a learn to ride your bike workshop. Now I have tried, I've given up teaching my son to ride a bike. I've just like, I can't deal with this right now. But then there's a workshop that is funded by NDIS, but then you get to choose, we want to allocate some of our money towards that. And so it's paid for us, partially paid for them. And I was like, yes, I do. To have a group of kids, and he's very anxious about it. I'm like, but the kids will be just like you. So it's not just mummy in the laneway going, we can do this, but other kids together learning. And I'm like, so you could put together your equivalent of that kind of thing, get it ticked off on. And I imagine you're touring schools, and the schools would be like, Jacinta's coming to speak. And then, it could come out of your funding or the school's. The sky is not even the limit with this. But it's just for you not allowing yourself to feel too overwhelmed. Like my suggestion, or homework, however you want to call it, you're a teacher, so I can say homework, is at the end of each day, like on a working day, if you write down, I did X and that was enough. So I did a coaching call with Suzanne, that was enough. I sent an email to an old school contact, that was enough. Because sometimes when we're in the overwhelm, we are trying to do all the things. And say you did get off this call and email 50 people. I'm not saying you would, but sometimes our hyperactivity can be good for us. Yeah. And then you don't hear from anything. So you're wallowing, everybody hates you. And then they all reply. And then, it's just too much. It's like, what one thing can I have done? Because once it starts rolling, I imagine it will roll really well. But it's like you're digging the foundations, which could take time.
But in the meantime, I'm educating myself, and I'm observing, and I'm asking questions, and I'm meeting people. So I'm trusting that this particular period of time where I am doing belief teaching, and I'm getting noses into different schools.
Imagine the connections you're making. As you said, the relief teaching might be like, oh, it's hard, but also you're meeting people at different schools that later you go, I know someone from there. I know someone from there.
Yeah. And also I'm definitely being pushed outside my comfort zone, and but then I'm okay. I'm okay at the moment. It's been a struggle, but I'm okay. And so that just by doing that and surviving, I've realized I am pretty tough. I don't enjoy certain days, but there's always a spark in every day. Like every day I come home with some kid who's just said something hilarious and just made me roar with laughter. And so there's sparks in every day, and focusing on that, the little wins while I'm growing as a person and looking where I want to go. But I love the idea of nurturing these sparkly little unicorns.
I love that. And you are growing concurrently. Like you're having the bills paid, so to speak, while you're doing this and building connections, and you're growing this. And then you'll reach a point where this out, and you might decide that you wrap that up. But I think I see so many people, what they do instead, they save up a buffer, then they quit this, and then their fledgling business, they shove with fertilizer, like, you need to support me. And it's like, it's too heavy. So if you can have this while it's feeding this until it reaches, and then let this one go, you're set.
Yeah. And I've been balancing as well how many days I do, because relief teaching is really, really stressful in that you turn up, it's possibly a place you've never been before, you get given what you have to do for the day, you're on survival mode the whole day, and you get to the end and you really can be really flustered and you've survived it. I've never been so happy to see 3 p.m. in my life before, and I've never so much looked at my watch. You know, there are sparks in every day, but it is very full on. But to then say, to get to a particular day and say, I'm not available, like the power of actually being able to say, I did it just before the holidays. I had a day. It was a beautiful sunny day. I went for a swim in the swimming pool, and I just felt like I was, it was heaven. So yeah, mental health days, because thank God they do pay relief teachers well, because it is the hardest job I think I've ever done.
Yeah, 100%. So as we wrap up, what's been your biggest takeaway?
The sky's the limit, pretty much. Yeah, and to match what I want to do with my personality, because I'm not going to become a YouTube star on purpose, because I don't like the spotlight.
You don't want to be an influencer? Hey, buy my latest water that revitalizes your youth.
And I won't be putting makeup on, doing myself pretty, like, it's just not me.
Sometimes they do both. They do their makeup while they're doing their live. Like if you're watching this and you do that, I'm not having a go. You do you. It's the principle I live by, but I'm just like, that's not for me. Finding the way that works for you, that feel goods for you, that lights you up, is part of the process.
Yeah. And recognizing that some things are just not for me. Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you very much, Jacinta. Thank you everyone for joining us. I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.